Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. I'm Bad as Fish 80 and today we're going to be looking at the new cards that were just added to Minion Masters. So for patch 1.39 that just dropped, that is the Slithery Sacrifices patch, we've got two new cards which are the Idol of Sacrifice and Taloc, the Vessel. Now I want to go through the new cards with you and we're going to check those out. I've also built a deck so we can see what they're like and we're going to check out some gameplay. But before we do that, there's a couple of keywords we need to make sure we fully understand so we can understand how these cards are going to work and how we can build a deck around them. Okay, so the keywords we have that we need to make sure that we're aware of are Slitherbind and Sacrifice. Now, Slitherbind. So this was previously called Cool Slitherbound. So if you'd heard that before, that is now called Slitherbind. So Slitherbind is a mechanic where it adds a Slitherbound minion to a Slither card in your hand. Remember, the Slitherbound minions are those little Slither guys. You either have the Lancers, which are the melee version, or you have the Darters, which are the ranged version. Okay, so a card with the Slitherbind mechanic, basically that means when you use it, as we just said, it will add a Slitherbound to another one of your Slither cards in your hand, and then when you play that card, you will also get the Slitherbounds spawned with it. Now, if it's a minion card, the Slitherbounds will spawn with the minion. If it's a spell card, they will spawn at the tower. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's the real benefit of these little guys? Well, there's a few benefits of them, and we'll have a look at exactly what you can do with them. Now, on the simplest side of things, the benefit is you've got some extra units. So they do damage, they do poison, they can take bridges. So that's one side of them. Extra free units, always a nice thing. So we see here the Slitherbind is available on a number of the Slither cards. Now we've got the Daggerfall, Hypnotize, Snake Druid, Musketeer, Stun Lancers, Lash of Armoon, which is the spell. That's got two cool Slitherbinds, so that adds two Slitherbounds to another card. Remember, you can have up to a maximum of 3 on a card. Impatient Statue, which has 3 Slitherbind, and Herald Armoon, which has 3 Slitherbind. So depending on which ones of those you're using, you can end up with a lot of additional Slitherbinds, Slitherbounds attached to your cards. So as we mentioned just briefly, these are extra units that can do some damage, take bridges, just relative normal minion things. But there's also another thing you can do with them, and that's where the second keyword comes in. That's the Sacrifice keyword. Now, this is not to be confused with the Gorek Sacrifice. That's something completely different. This is a sacrifice for the Slither faction. So what the Sacrifice does is it kills a certain amount of Slitherbounds, and depending on what cards you're using, certain things will happen. Now we'll have a look at the cards that have the mechanic, the Sacrifice mechanic. So we've got the Gambler's Ball. Sacrifice 3 Slitherbounds to get a double spell. Poison Strike. Sacrifice 2 to double the poison duration. Slithering Summon. Sacrifice 3 to get the summoned unit's spirit. Rabid Prowler. Sacrifice 1 to give it Berserker Rage. Empowered Soul Stealer. Get extra 3 souls for each Slitherbound sacrificed. And Herald Armoon resurrects with 75 HP per Slitherbound sacrificed. Right, so those are the two keywords that we need to be aware of, and hopefully we can understand those. So Slitherbind and Sacrifice. So now that we understand those, we can get a better idea of how the new cards work. So, as mentioned, the first new card is the Idol of Sacrifice. So, the Idol of Sacrifice, it's basically a living statue, but when you spawn it, it spawns as a building. So it will just stand there, it will be taking damage with the building decay, and it will be waiting. And what it's waiting for is you to sacrifice something. So as we spoke about before, a number of cards with sacrifice. If you have the Idol of Sacrifice sitting there waiting, and you trigger the sacrifice on one of your other cards, then the Idol of Sacrifice is triggered. And when it's triggered, it becomes a minion. It gains rage, heals for 250 health, and then will go about its living statue business. So the idea of this guy is that you will spawn him, and then you will have a sacrifice ready to go, and you will trigger him, and you will get a raged statue. And we'll see how that works in a deck in just a little bit. Now, the next card we have is Taloc the Vessel. Now, Taloc the Vessel is basically a Slitherbound, but he's a special Slitherbound. So he's got a lot more HP, and he does a lot more damage. Now, he also has the ability where he can do double damage to minions that are poisoned or stunned. So 60 DPS on poisoned or stunned minions is a lot of damage coming out for a 3 mana minion. Also, interestingly, he counts when you're performing a sacrifice. So if you need to sacrifice, for example, 3 Slitherbounds, if you've got 2 plus Taloc, that counts as 3, but he survives the sacrifice. So he will count towards the sacrifice, but he will not be consumed by it. So we can see the 2 new cards are built around the sacrifice. So let's have a look now at a deck. This is a deck I made quickly just to have a look at how this potential... how we could maybe utilize these 2 new cards. So we can see we've got a Slither deck here. It's based on it's Rect. Rect is just a strong master. I just chose him for no real reason apart from that. Okay, so we've got the Chain Gang, so that's going to give us some Slitherbounds. We're either going to get the Slitherbound Lancers, which are the melee ones, or if we play this within 5 seconds of another card, we get the arguably more valuable ranged version. So this is a way of getting Slitherbounds directly, rather than having to go through the Slitherbind mechanic. Then we've got the Gambler's Ball. So remember, the idea of this deck is we're going to try to get the Idol of Sacrifice out, and then we're going to try to trigger it with some sacrifices. So we need some sacrifice cards. So the Gambler's Ball is one of those. Remember, if you sacrifice 3 Slitherbounds, you get to cast the spell twice. So you might get 2 healing fireballs, 2 fireballs, or 1 of each. Next up we have the Snake Druid, which has the Slitherbind on it. Taloc, as we saw. Musketeer, again with the Slitherbind, so we're trying to generate all of these extra Slitherbounds. We got the Poison Strike. Again, this is another potential card that can trigger the sacrifice. Extra poison duration. We got the Stun Lancers, which have Slitherbind on them. We got the Idol of Sacrifice itself. We got the Rabid Prowler, which, as we've seen previously, does have the sacrifice available on it. And we've got Akinlep's Gong of Pestilence. So this is really just there as a tank. Also, his attacks do poison damage. So of course, if we're getting poisoned units, then Taloc the Vessel will do double damage against them. So we've got the Idol of Sacrifice, which needs to be triggered by a sacrifice. We've got 3 sacrifice mechanics available within the deck, which are the Gambler's Ball, the Poison Strike, and the Rabid Prowler. Okay, so those are the new cards. Those are the keywords, the mechanics that they revolve around, and here's a deck that I put together to test them. Let's try it out. I jumped into a ladder match, and it turned out we were playing against Nick Show, very, very high level Minion Masters player. And let's see how these worked out. So with the setup of having to use the Idol and then get the sacrifice, it can be a little cumbersome to play. Sometimes you just have to try to hit your combo as you wish and ignore what your opponent is doing a little bit. So let's have a look how this pans out here. So Taloc spawned at the top, did have the extra Slitherbound attached to it from the Snake Druid. Now, as you can see, we've got 2 sacrifices available. So there goes the statue. Now, one thing to notice about the statue is it kind of looks like it's floating, but it is based on the ground. So the ground units there can attack it. So what happened there is we played the statue, it was waiting to be activated, and then we triggered the Rabid Prowler. So the Rabid Prowler did consume the sacrifice. I think it may have had one of the Slitherbounds on it already attached to it, so it effectively sacrificed its own Slitherbound. And that sacrifice triggered the statue. So the statue now is a living statue. It is raged. It did heal for 250, and we have a bit of an early push going. Now the Rabid Prowler is insane. Berserker Rage, double damage, no self-damage anymore. Okay, so we're playing against a Setsu deck. We will struggle when it comes to control. We have some clunky, heavy cards in our deck, so we won't be able to stay up on XP. As we can see, we're already behind here. But we need to try to stick to our guns and utilize the strat that we have. Okay, so Niksho playing the Cage Prowler there. Not really any way that we can put pressure on it. Akinlep pushed at the bottom, but this gets very, very denied by the wall and all the melee units. Great tank in there of the wall. Poison comes in. It's not a triggered sacrifice poison, so it doesn't do too much damage there. Okay, so we're not too far behind on XP here. We need to be careful. We've got a lot of weak units, especially the Slitherbound, so we need to be careful, especially with the Setsu jump, that we don't allow him to jump in and crush those. You'll see sometimes I'm patient, waiting for Setsu to land, and then we try to deal with it. Okay, so we've got the Prowler at the bottom. I misplayed that a little bit where I didn't get the jump from my Rabid Prowler, so didn't really trade as well as possible, but just destroying itself there on the wall. Okay, so we've fallen a little bit behind on XP here. The good thing about Wrecked is it gives us extra bridge control, bridge grabs. You can see grabbing the bridge at the top, so that's helpful. So I think Niksho would be happy with how the game's going at the moment. He's done quite a lot of damage to us. He is in control in XP. He's got a good idea of what we're going. And here's an example of Setsu coming in. I know Setsu's going to jump on all of this. I don't want to spawn everything and get it just jumped upon, so I just wait with those stun lancers and then we shut it down. Okay, so if we take a second here, we've got in my hand, you can see I do have the Idol of Sacrifice, so that's ready to go. We also have a couple of other sacrifice enabled cards, so we could potentially trigger it there with the Gambler's Ball. We could also potentially trigger it there with the Poison Strike, if of course we have enough Slitherbounds to trigger it. Pushing at the bottom, getting the Akinlep tank out. So a decent looking push at the bottom. Just remember, you've always got to have in your mind getting the statue down. So there's the statue, and then we're looking to trigger it. There's the trigger with the Gambler's Ball. So this is a huge push coming out. We've got a lot of HP in the Akinlep, some awkward units with the Stun Lancers, and then we have the Idol of Sacrifice, which is Rage. The wall is misplayed a little bit too late there. The Rabid Prowler on face as well, so that's a huge amount of damage, a huge amount of DPS, and as you could see, we had an idea of how we were going to win that game. And it wasn't through control. It wasn't trying to get to Mana Frenzy first and win. It was clearly just trying to set up a great big push and then close him down, close the game out by just doing a huge amount of damage. And as you could see, that's exactly what we did. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That was just a quick look into the two new cards added in the Slithery Sacrifices expansion for Minion Masters, the Idol of Sacrifice, and Taloc the Vessel. Let me know if you guys get a chance to check this out. I'll put the command to copy this deck into the description for the video, so you can check it out if you want to. Try it, see what you think of it. If you've got any ways of improving it or playing it differently, let me know. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please feel free to give it a subscribe and a thumbs up to make sure you don't miss any further Minion Masters content here in the Fish Tank. I'm Bad as Fish 80, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.